Brilliant. So we're going to make a start. So welcome to an introduction to the third sector trend study webinar. My name's Gemma Austin and I'm a research and insight project lead from Durham Community Action. For anyone who doesn't know who we are, Durham Community Action is a local infrastructure organisation based in County Durham that works with and supports voluntary sector organisations across the county. We do that in a number of ways by providing advice and training and support, but we also deliver a number of network and partnerships, bringing the sector together to collaborate as well. So I'm pleased to be joined today by Professor Tony Chapman from Durham University, who's going to be talking about the third sector trend study, which is a longitudinal study that's been around for quite some time now. It's one of the longest running surveys of its kind of the voluntary sector. It actually began in the Northeast, which Tony, I'm sure, will tell you, but now incorporates the whole of England and Wales too. So we're really pleased he can be here with us today. So just an overview. Of course, Tony will provide an introduction to the study. He will also be taking you through a look at some of the insight collected on County Durham in the past. And then we'll be going in conversation with Tony to explore the benefits of voluntary sector organisations taking part in the study and how some of the findings might support your own work. And then we'll look at some examples of perhaps outcomes and impact as a result of the study. And then we'll be inviting the audience to share any questions that you have too. So please do post your questions in the chat throughout. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And there's an opportunity for questions at the end as well. So without further ado, Tony, I'm now going to hand over to you. Welcome, a warm welcome. It's lovely to have you with us.
Hi, everybody. Some of you will know me, some of you won't. I've been around a long time doing this, and I'm not bored yet. That's the best part of it. In fact, it's peculiarly exciting if you're a nerd like me. Yesterday, we did a reminder to charities to take part in the study, and we got past the 5,000 milestone, which is really good. That's across England and Wales. So for me, it's quite exciting because it's the biggest study, it's the longest study, and you know what we academics are like. We always like to be a bit competitive about these things. I'm also a bit competitive about County Durham too, because this is where we are, and this is where we've worked so intensively for so long. So if we look at the first slide, just very quickly, we started way back 2008, Northern Rock Foundation supported it originally. Now it's the Community Foundation in Newcastle, Community Foundation Northeast. We went national. Is that just pure kind of egotism, or is it about something else? Well, it's a bit of both. I wanted it to be national because I thought the findings we were collecting were of significance to the whole sector in the whole of the UK, not just the Northeast and Cumbria. And the problem was that news channels stuff, they didn't really notice us because they thought, oh, we're just a load of Northerners, and that's not quite so interesting to them. So we went national in 2019 and did get that attention. But the real bonus is that we can compare areas and see how typical it is in, say, County Durham compared with other sorts of areas. And that's a vital element of the work. You can't understand County Durham if you don't look somewhere else, is the message. We do quite well in County Durham and in the Northeast. Last time we got 600 responses. We're currently on about 380, something like that. I can't tell you the County Durham yet, but it's not looking bad because Durham Community Action last week, there's a direct mailing. We got about 25 responses immediately, which was terrific. We also use the registers so that we can check that we're representative. It's the only representative study really because it's big enough to do that. And I think the big advantage of what we do is that we're not there, this might sound shocking, we're not there to celebrate the sector. We're there to show what the sector achieves for the world. That's what we do. So we're not advocates, and we're honest and open about how we do things. And sometimes it means we deliver messages that people don't like. But that can be a good thing, you know, to address issues that may be a bit uncomfortable, but nevertheless tell you what's actually going on from your own perspective, because it's you who tell us what's happening. Next slide. People talk about the voluntary sector. There is no the voluntary sector, really. It's a place. It's not a thing. It's not business. It's not private life. It's not the state. So it's a place where voluntary organisations operate. And it's really important to keep that distinction, because too often, I think, you hear people saying the sector is doing this and the sector is feeling that. And actually, it doesn't make a great deal of sense, because you've got many sectors in one. If you just look at this chart here, big organizations with, over 1 million to 25 million income, they command an enormous amount of the money of the sector because they're large. They're big organizations. 71% of the money goes to 5% of organizations. But the small organizations, which don't have that much money, don't need that much money, dominate the sector in terms of numbers. That's a really crucial point to bear in mind. We don't see it as a continuum. Medium-sized organizations are not halfway house. They're different. They operate really quite differently from the small ones and really quite differently from the big ones. Lots of people who run medium-sized organizations, we've found out, are there because they don't want to be in big organizations anymore. They want flat structures. They want to have a much more human sort of way of looking for organizations. Okay, we'll look at the next slide. I'm going quick because Gemma's got questions. We get a lot of discussion about money in the sector. People do get preoccupied with it, even though it sometimes can be the cause of problems, not always the solutions. But if you look over the last 12 years, this was from 2010 to 2022, you can see how the mood has changed in the sector about what sources of income are much more important. Grants have become relatively more important. Contracts stayed fairly level, but not for smaller organizations. Investment income went through the floor because investments were no longer worth anything. It's starting to rise again. We also like to show contributions in kind, how important that is to the sector, gifts and good donation subscriptions. And also the massive amount of media attention that went to borrowing and social investment, and yet the sector is frankly not interested. Next slide. This is all Durham, obviously. Relationship with grant funders. This is going to be really interesting this time around, because everyone's got a view on this, and everybody's telling me what their views are on this, which is really, really interesting. But during the COVID days, there was a bump when funders were giving out much more unrestricted funding, in other words, core funding, no strings attached. And they did so because they were being generous. They didn't quite know what to do. So they thought, well, let's have a free-for-all. What's going to happen in 2025, we wonder? I suspect that was a bump and will drop down again, but I don't know for sure, but I think we'll drop down. On the second one, I think we've got a trough. They took time to get to know us. In 2022, it dropped a lot, but that's because they couldn't get out. So I suspect that'll go up a bit. Pressured us to provide evidence of our impact. It fell through the floor, but I think it'll be creeping up again. Whether it reaches 5% again, I don't know. But impact assessment, it's a double-edged sword for organisations. But approach to see if we want to support. That went up. A lot of organisations didn't apply for money during COVID, and the grant funders actually came to you to try to encourage it. I suspect that's probably gone downhill again. But that's the fun of this. I won't keep going with this slide, but it shows you that things change as time goes on, and we've seen so much change. So look at the next slide again. When I started this project in 2008, everyone was saying, it's all about contracts now. That's the only game in town. It's not true. It never was true, and it's becoming less true. Micro-organizations, well, how could they? Why would they? Small organizations, similarly. Medium-sized ones, initially, they used to sort of work with a bigger contractor as, the prime contractor, if you like, and do some support for them. But steadily, it's dropped. And with large organizations, even with 250 to £1 million income, it's steadily dropped. The big organizations are stuck in there, but we'll see this time whether they still are or not. And the next slide again, and I'm almost done. Now, I'm an optimist. And I sit in lots of meetings and have sat with lots of meetings with the voluntary sector over the last 15 years, hearing people being extremely gloomy about money, and people say things like we're all going to fall off the edge of a cliff. It's been said for years, and yet you're still here. The sector is much, much more sustainable than people think it is, and there's a reason for that. Or many reasons for that. Organizations can keep going in a way that businesses can't. When things get tight, they can shift their emphasis to some extent. But there was a headline yesterday in civil society media: nearly half of small charities fear risk of closure within a year, it said, on the basis of the research they've done. I don't believe a word of that. I absolutely do not believe a word of that. And if you ask people to tell you a gloomy story, they'll tell you it. But that's not what we do. Now, if you look at this graph, expectations about income, there's an irony here, a deep, deep irony about the voluntary sector. Privately, you're very optimistic. Publicly, you tend to be a bit gloomy when you get together, just as art dealers do, or car salesmen, or even academics. Well, I don't know about us, we're a terribly jolly lot. But you get a sense that people were very, very optimistic in 2022. 49% of the biggest organizations thought their income would decrease, and 43% thought to stay the same. Hardly anyone expected to decrease. And that's why people get gloomy, because you always think it's going to be better than it is. But things aren't so bad as we think. If they are bad, we want to know where. Rather than saying the whole sector's in trouble, say, where is the trouble? And that's where we inform. Okay, that's it for that, and go back to Gemma.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tony. It's really nice to have that introduction to the study, but also for you to share some of the insight collected in the past, and just share your thoughts around what that's telling us. I think the study is really interesting, and I know that it explores lots of different parts of the sector. And I think there's something in there this year around the environmental aspects of the voluntary sector. I guess with kind of all of that in mind, I think one of the things I know that we hear from sort of charities in the sector is that we're bombarded sometimes with surveys, and we're asked to complete all sorts of different things. And I think it would be really nice to hear kind of what the benefits and the values are for organisations to continue taking part in this study, and why it's so important.
Yeah, there are a lot of surveys around. And I have to say that when I pressed the button on the 2nd of June to get this one going, I was really scared that people would not answer, because everyone kept saying we're all overwhelmed with it. Actually, we're getting 25% more this time than it did in 2022. And that's probably because in 2022, everyone was looking at COVID. There were just hundreds of things floating around. So we seem to be more back to normal. Why do people take part? And what's the point of them taking part? I think it's because not many people actually ask them about themselves, rather than something that the researcher wants. Now, I do want information, I do, but each of the survey questionnaires is more like a conversation. It's a lot of people write back to me saying, this has made me think. It's made me reflect on things, and that's purposefully what we do. And because we've been doing it so long, we've learned how to do that. I saw a project in another area this week where they were really looking for a headline. They were looking for a doom headline. And I don't think that helps the sector very much. And I think it just reinforces those anecdotes that I've already mentioned. I'll go back to Jimmy, because I know she's going to ask me more questions.
Yeah.
I can get
No, that's really, really interesting. I think you could have probably spoken a lot more about that, but I think it's great to hear that, you are getting that engagement. People understand what the study's for. But hopefully we've kind of shone a bit of a spotlight on it for those organisations that might not be taking part. Actually, there are benefits, because it can make you really consider and think about things in a different way. And I think as well, it really it is a great opportunity to shine a light on the sector sector as a whole as well, like you said. As well, I think organisations and as a sector, again in County Durham, the voluntary sector, we're always using insight and research to try and help inform our work. So I did wonder how the insight collected in this study might be useful to support a voluntary sector's work. Are there any examples of that you could share?
I could say a lot. I'll say one thing. I'll talk about leaders and leadership.
Okay.
Leadership is a funny thing to be involved with. It can be quite a lonely sort of thing. You can't tell the staff everything all the time. Every time you get worried about something, because you undermine, the morale in the place. We're asking about how leaders feel about various different things, and we're using a scale where we're saying that makes me excited. It gets me up in the morning, and another one that said no, that makes me worried and keeps me awake at night. And we're trying to find out what sort of things that are causing them concern or causing them a sense of excitement. Nobody ever asks that. Nobody ever looks at that sort of question. And again, I was dreading it. Will people answer? Yes, they are. They're answering in really kind of big numbers. And the reason for the question, ironically, is that in 2022, somebody wrote to me and said, you said this survey was interesting, but it was really boring. So I thought, oh God, I've got to get an interesting question in early on to get them going and get them thinking, to show that we're not being boring, because some of it is boring. I mean, of course it is, when does your organization establish is not the most exciting question in the world. This is quite important though, because we ask them about lots of things. Is leadership about, or what is it exciting, bidding for money, or does it worry you to death? Is it exciting to deal with difficult relationships, or does it worry you to death? Because it's a big study, we can compare and contrast and see, well, let's look at the worriers and see who they are and why they are. Let's look at the excited ones and see why they're more optimistic. Now, we might not find anything. We might find there's no statistical relationship, but I'll be flipping surprised if we don't. One of the things that I've asked is about, recognition. Is that something that worries you or makes you feel kind of excited about what you're doing? Nobody ever asks that sort of question. I think we should do, because working in the voluntary sector is hard work. It's tough work, tough for leaders. They need to, they can't drive themselves entirely on altruism. They have to have some kind of personal benefit coming from it as well. And I respect that. I think that's an important thing to respect. So the sort of insights we might collect, I can't tell you what they are, but I think we're going to get them.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I think you've shone a spotlight on some of the challenges of some of the leaders within the sector, and actually pointed that out, which is useful. I guess as well, I'm always interested in this with anything like this. Can you share any tangible examples, I think from your perspective, Tony, on the impact of the study to date? So any outcomes or impact as a result, because you've been doing the study now for a long time. So it would be great to, I guess, share some of those examples with people listening.
I think because we don't position ourselves as advocates for the sector, I think funders and the public sector and businesses trust us more, and they listen to us more. And that might not sound like much of an impact, but actually I think it probably is, because if they are thinking about how to invest, they need to know where impact falls, and we can show that. We can show where the work goes on. We can show if it happens in rich areas or poor areas with particular groups of beneficiaries. We can actually demonstrate it in quite clear terms what's going on. We also can show where the sector feels it really invests its energy into social impact. So we go for soft things like social isolation, tackling that sort of thing. We go for hard things like employability and so forth. lots of organizations do their individual work, and that's brilliant in the sense that they can demonstrate what they do. But we need to have that more generalized coverage as well in order to show where impact falls.
Yeah, no, that's a really good answer. And I think, yeah, it's just the vast array of value that the sector actually contributes to the much wider system. And as you say, you can shine again a light on that. So yeah, it's great. Thank you. Now, I think in the interest of time, I'd like to see if there's any questions from the audience. So I'm going to see if we've got anything in the chat. I'm not sure. I'm going to have a look. We have got a couple of comments, so let's have a look. Okay, so somebody's asked if there's going to be a link to the survey. Yes, there will be, Liz. We're going to share that at the end. So thank you for asking that. That's something we're definitely going to be sharing in just a moment. I wonder if anyone else has any questions about the study, anything that you want to check or find out about. If somebody wants to put their hand up and come on and ask a question, they can, or you can use the chat. That's fine too. But I'll just leave that for a moment, see if anybody else has got anything that they would like to find out. I think whilst people are thinking, it would be great, I guess, just to ask and find out if the study has got any limitations. Do you think that it misses anything that is important that might already be collected somewhere else? So that's just a bit of a question for you there, Tony, from my perspective.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Of course it does. I mean, I ask 30 questions. In my head, I have 160 questions, but I know I can only pester people so much for so much information. So there's things I'd like to ask, which I know I can't. So yes, of course, it does have some limitations, but surveys have limitations in themselves as well, because they can only approach things from certain ways. We've done other studies. We did a 15-year study, including County Durham, where we followed 50 organisations in the northeast, and we talked to them. We went back every 2 or 3 years and explored things with them. And through that kind of work, really working closely with organisations, that's where we found the questions to ask quite often. Yeah. So we try to interact the two things, because it's really, you can do anything with statistics, you can do anything with qualitative work. The thing is to meld them together to try and out. There's other things we can't do, which other people can. So 360 giving, if you don't know it, you want to play with it, it's a really good source of data, shows where the grant funding is going. You can do it locally, you can say who's getting what. Not inviting you all to be spies, but you can find out who's doing what. And it's really, nobody else can do that. I can't do that. It's tremendous stuff. So we use all of that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. No, that's really open and transparent answer. I think there is a couple of questions now that's come in from the audience. So somebody's asked, does the study show if the number of volunteers are increasing or decreasing? So currently, what's that looking like? Or what did it look like last time?
Yeah, last time it dived. But not a calamitous dive, but it dropped. We had COVID, people stopped coming. I do know what's going on at the moment, but I can't tell you. And the reason why I can't tell you, because I don't want to bias the study. But with 5,000, I've got a pretty good idea what's going on. But the thing with volunteers is that I can't reveal what I know.
Yes, it's fine.
I have to keep it secret, but
we understand. Yes,
but we want to know. We want to know, don't we? Have we recovered from the COVID dive? Has it come together again? Have the older people who stopped volunteering, who we spotted last time, have they started coming back, or have they stayed away? So that will tell you soon.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. So, so on that, watch this space. It'll be interesting to see what the insight tells us later on. But that leads quite nicely on to another question someone has about how long the survey is going to be open. And I think as well, is there somewhere we can see the results of the study so far? But I think you've answered that. There is no kind of insight into the results as they come through. But what?
you have to be careful about bias. It's really important.
Yeah.
If you start revealing things, people start answering in different ways. So you just mustn't do it.
Mm.
We'll report very fast though. I mean, during
Hmm.
during the summer while the survey is still going on, that's when I start pretty much writing things down really, and then when the final results are in, then we can do that. We've got enough now to do a national report. We really do. 5,000 is a lot, but
Yeah.
it's not a national study. It's a local study. That's the whole point of it. The idea is that we do it nationally in order to understand localities. And so
Hmm.
we need to get the numbers up. At the moment in County Durham, we're doing quite well, but we haven't got enough to
Yeah.
to to be able to say with confidence
Hmm.
happening. And that's why we're here, because we think that the local voluntary sector has its kind of biggest impact really through a wealth of different ways, and we need to compare rich and poor areas, north and south, east and west, wherever we look. That's what we have to do. So we keep it open till the end of September. We rest it. As soon as the school holidays start, we stop campaigning. It's still open, but we don't pester anyone anymore. We let people relax a bit, think, oh, he's got away, thank God for that. And then 1st of September, we're back again. We've got community foundation supporters at that stage. And we
Okay.
can normally raise the responses by about another quarter. Um,
Okay.
and that's how we get that local work. And if you've only got 20 in an area, you can't say anything. If you've got 120, you can start to say something, providing you've got comparative evidence.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a really valid point. So thank you. So I think that's answered all the questions, and which brings us really nicely to the last few minutes. So thank you, Tony, very much for having that conversation with us today and explaining more about the study, the benefits of taking part, and of course some of the impact of these findings. And I'm sure everyone's going to be looking forward to seeing the results later in the year. I'm going to move on there just to kind of point out where the study can be found. So, of course, we're going to share a link in a moment, and it can be found directly on the study's website via the Community Foundation, and you will be invited to take part. We've already been reaching out via Durham Community Action, and we'll continue to do that as well. So Durham Community Action will share the study link again throughout the period that Tony's mentioned until it closes. So do please take part. If you haven't already done so, please do communicate it to your other networks, so other VCSE organisations that you're in touch with, other meetings and spaces that you're involved with. Just mention it, because it could increase those numbers for County Durham, which is absolutely what we want. So we're going to just post the link in the chat now. So you've got that directly to take away with you. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate your time as well, Tony. And just to say thank you, we will be posting a poll on the screen in just a second. So please do complete that before you drop off the call, just to let us know your experience today. And if there's any questions, get in touch afterwards via email. It's info@durhamcommunityaction.org.uk. Thank you, everyone. We'll let you go now.